Good to see each and every one of you here with us this evening. If you couldn't tell from the video, the lights, the Christmas trees, the Christmas season is upon us. In the church calendar, we call that Advent. If you're not familiar with the word Advent, for what exactly it means, it comes from the Latin word. I'm not sure the word exactly it comes from in Latin. I'm guessing Adventus, but it means coming. And it's this season where we are preparing for God's coming. You know, that God became man through the person of Jesus. He became incarnate, and that he came into this world. And so we'll be focusing on one text from from Isaiah 9, chapter 9, verse 6, that lists these four names for this coming Messiah. And we'll be looking at that over this next 4 weeks as we're preparing for Christmas, preparing for the birth of Jesus. And again, the title of this series is The Greatest Gift. And so I want to kick off the series by just asking you, what was the greatest gift you've ever received? I don't usually do this, but feel free to shout out the greatest gift you ever received on Christmas. Maybe it was from when you were a kid, or maybe it was as an adult. What were some great gifts you received? That guitar. Nice. Guitars are good gifts. Any other great gifts? Waffle maker, nice. All right, we got two. Let's see if we can get one more for the true Trinity factor. One more. Sam, what was the greatest gift you received? Oh my goodness, that's a great one right there. That's a great one. Well, the gift I was most excited about came to me when I was in first grade. It's something that I had wanted for a really long time and been asking my parents for a long time. And my mom told me at the moment that she knew that there was no more hope of me not getting this gift was when my Boy Scout troop, at that point I was a Tiger Scout, and that's as far as I went as well, but my Tiger Scout troop, we went to the Humane Society to see these dogs. And what we were told is that these dogs really needed a home. And I could do that. You know, I could give them a home. I desperately wanted to give one of them a home. And so after that, that had been around October, and my parents just knew there was no more they could do to hold out. And so around late November, we got a dog for the first time. And I had the pleasure of naming her. I named her Muffy, short for Muffin. And Muffy, as a as a little boy, man, I just loved her so much. My mom joked around and called her the gift that kept on giving. And that's because Muffy was just super demanding as a dog. And so, you know, even though she was a gift, she demanded much more than she probably gave us. But nonetheless, as a little boy, a dog, I loved my dog dearly. And as I think about that gift, what we think about during this time of Advent is we remember that, we didn't only receive this great gift as we remember Christmas, but, we received the single greatest gift in the history of the world or the history of the universe. And so over these next 4 weeks, we're going to be looking at 4 different names that the prophet Isaiah uses to describe this gift. I'm just going to read that text now. It's in Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 through 7, and if you have a Bible or it'll be on the screen behind us, feel free to turn there now. Verse 6 reads, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of his peace there will be no end. And on the throne of David and over his kingdom to establish it and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. And the zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this." So today we're going to start off with the first of those 4 names, Wonderful Counselor. And if I say the word counselor, what comes to your mind? You don't have to answer or throw out things this time since it's a little more of a personal question. But maybe for you, what comes to mind is a small office, maybe 2 separate couches. Maybe there's a box of Kleenex there that you've either used yourself or you've known someone you've cared about who's used those Kleenexes before. And when you think about going to a counselor, you think about a space, maybe it took you a while to actually get there. Maybe it's something that you'd wanted to do for a while, but it's this space where you go and then where you work through certain problems that you're dealing with. But when we hear that word counselor, and we hear that Jesus is a wonderful counselor, I wonder if sometimes we think that name is a little misappropriated. I wonder if sometimes we think it, around the Christmas time especially, that we love that he is, as Linus says, goodwill to men and a savior for all. We love this idea that Jesus is, around the Christmas time, that there's this beautiful baby and this little nativity scenes where we have the shepherds, we have the wise men. It's a very sentimental space. And I think we even love, like, the Christmas time, like singing Christmas songs, having the Christmas tree, decorating it, be with family. But sometimes I wonder if Jesus just feels a little too sentimental during this season. And I wonder if because of that, if we have a hard time, if he's sentimental or abstract, if we have a hard time really believing that he can be our personal, wonderful counselor. You see the word wonderful here, it doesn't mean wonderful like we'd use in English, like purely great, but it means indescribably good, beyond words. And so I wonder during this season, if we truly can see Jesus that way, because I think some of us, we say to ourselves, but I have these problems. I have these struggles, these issues in my life, and I would love to be Jesus to be that person who I could go to with those problems. But sometimes he just feels a little just too sentimental. Sometimes he just feels a little too different. And so today, as we explore this title, Wonderful Counselor, I want to give you some reasons, and I want to look together at why this name is so incredibly appropriate for Jesus, why he truly is our wonderful counselor. And so the first reason is that Jesus is the wonderful counselor because he addresses our ultimate problem at its core. And so if we're going to understand this prophecy, it actually doesn't begin in chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, or even in chapter 9 at all. It starts more in chapter 7, verses 14. So feel free to turn there now, or it'll also be on the screen behind me. This is where the prophecy actually starts. Verse 14 reads, "Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and you will call his name Emmanuel," which means God is with us. So real quick tutorial on how prophecy works in the Old Testament. Oftentimes there is, for prophecy, we'll see that there's like an immediate fulfillment. It's something that happens very shortly after this prophecy is given. But then there's also an ultimate fulfillment, something that happens much, much later that this immediate prophecy actually even points to. And so kind of let me look at the immediate fulfillment first. So the immediate fulfillment, it says that there's going to be a son. And Isaiah, he actually does have a son, and his son's name is Maher Shalal Hashbaz. As Laura and I were talking about baby names, I really wanted Maher Shalal Hashbaz. She wanted Asher. So we compromised, and we picked Asher. That's kind of how marriage goes. So immediately there's this fulfillment that there is actually a son, but the ultimate fulfillment is in chapter 9, again with those titles, because those titles are just too far grand for any human to be called. So let me recall these names to us again. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So again, those names are just far too grand for any human to fulfill. So let me give you the actual context, though, of our passage, of this whole prophecy as we're looking at it. And again, why would even Jesus, or why would God promise a child in the first place? So this prophecy, the context of it is that it's back in 730 BC. King Ahaz is the king of Judah at that point. And God has made this promise to him because he's in a real pickle right now. So at that point, the big kid on the block, who's a little bit of a bully, is the king of Assyria. And the king is kind of ruthless, and the people can see the writing on the wall at that time that he was going to be stealing everyone's lunch money. He was going to be taking their spaces at the lunch table, and he was going to be their overlord. And if you're kind of an independent people, you don't really like that. You kind of like your lunch money and your independence. And so a couple of different groups there, kind of a couple of the smaller kids, you could say, in the region, both the northern tribes of Israel as well as Syria, they decided to form a little bit of an alliance, and they wanted to bring Judah into their alliance as well. And so they wanted to create this triple alliance, triple threat, to actually be able to protect themselves against the big bully Assyria. But as they're creating this alliance, Judah is not interested. Or sorry, I should say that Samaria, or the northern tribes, as well as Syria, they're bounded together, but Judah isn't fully interested. And so what happens in the context of this passage is that Judah is being pressured to join this alliance. And they're told that if you don't join this triple alliance, we will attack you. And so again, Ahaz has found himself in a pickle. What's he going to do? Is he going to join their alliance, or is he going to be on his own and be even more vulnerable to the Assyrians? But there's good news, because when this passage was written, the sign that I just read you of Emmanuel, that was God giving Ahaz a sign. And he told Ahaz, trust in me rather than these foreign armies. If you trust in me, if you trust in my power, I will deliver you from these enemies. And to show you that I will do that, he said, I will give you a sign. And he had Isaiah communicate this message to Ahaz. But oddly enough, King Ahaz is not interested in a sign. He tells Isaiah that he has no interest in receiving a sign. And at first, that seems kind of odd to us. Imagine, think of one of the problems that you're going through right now. If someone communicated you to from God that God wanted to deal with your issue right then and there, and it was going to be with you and dealing with that, wouldn't that be really good news to us? And yet, when King Ahaz hears is that he wants nothing to do with it. But I think as we kind of contemplate more why he might have not wanted to hear this, not wanted to see this sign, I think it begins to make a little bit more sense. You see, King Ahaz was king of his kingdom, and he really wanted to protect what he had. And if he was going to receive this sign, that means he was going to be accountable to follow it and to wait on God. But if he's going to wait on God, that means that he can't actually create alliances on his own. He can't finagle and move on his own and do his own political maneuvering. He has to patiently wait on God. And what would happen to him if God failed him? If God didn't come through for him? See, for King Ahaz, that was just too risky of an endeavor. It was too risky to trust on God, because he thought it was far more safe to trust himself and to trust the action that he could do. And so I think we can definitely see where King Ahaz is coming from, because we have all been there ourselves. And so let me kind of analyze King Ahaz's problem real quick here. So his problem, he sees, the greatest problem is that there's this external threat of war from Syria and the northern tribes. And so he tells himself that his greatest need of all is to resolve that, and then to quickly find a way to have an alliance himself, to trust in other nations. But I wonder if you, like Ahaz, has ever had a problem in your life that maybe it was a problem that had been going on for a long time, and it was a problem that you really wanted to be resolved, and then finally it was resolved. Have you ever had one of those issues where it's something that's been ongoing for a long time in your life, like during the issue, you've wanted to be resolved so bad, but then it's finally resolved. And when it's resolved, that might be a really good thing in your life. Maybe that was something that really needed to get resolved. But I wonder, because this is what has happened to me all too often in those moments, is that when it's finally resolved, I'm barely even contemplating the resolution. I'm barely even able to celebrate the resolution, because what happened? Well, because there's already a new problem that was fully taking that exact same headspace. You guys ever had that happen before? Where there's this problem that was so big in your life that you couldn't wait for it to be resolved, but then finally when it is resolved, it's like you can't even celebrate it, because there's already something else in your mind that is taking up all your headspace. A number of you are college students in the room here tonight, and so I could imagine that as you are preparing for finals, preparing to graduate for college, that there could be stress as you think about what is next in your life. And so you might place a lot of importance on getting those good grades, and you might stress of I have to do well in these finals, get those good grades so that afterwards I can get that good job. But then when you graduate, sure, you might have a celebration with your family, but pretty soon after, you're like, oh man, now I actually have to find that job. I got those grades, I got what I was looking for, but now reality is hitting that I need to find this job. And so you do that job search and you find the job. Then once you find the job, at first it's good, you're enjoying it, you enjoy that you have this new job, you're finally getting to use the degree you have, but pretty soon you start to worry. Am I going to be able to keep this job? Am I going to be able to make friends here? Am I really going to fit in at this place? And so you work really hard, and soon, a little bit of time passes, soon it pays off, and you feel okay, I'm securing this job, the people like me, and I'm doing well. But then you notice that some of my coworkers are really annoying. Some of them are slackers. They're just always drop the ball. I can't rely on them. And it would just be so much better if I had more control here. If I was in charge, things would look a lot different. If I was in charge, I could make some of these problems go away, and I would lead this company well, or this division well. But then the next thing you notice is that once you are in charge, man, your underling employees, like your subordinates, are just so frustrating. Like you try to have the conversation with them, you have it over and over again, but they still just don't get it. They can't get it together, they can't meet their deadlines, they're still having problems, and you're really frustrated with them. And you've moved up the company, and now you're just starting to say, man, I cannot wait till retirement. When I finally get to retirement, then I will be at this place where I can just relax and have a good time and have no more stressors. I'll just be like on the golf course, and it'll be great. And then that happens. You're on the golf course, and you're enjoying dinners with your friends and with your buddies, and you're having a good time with your family, but you're kind of like, oh man, I kind of miss working every day. I kind of miss having that purpose each day for what I was doing. I wish I still was working. And so the whole point of that is to say, what if resolving our current problem isn't our biggest problem? What if there's actually a greater need that we have than purely resolving our current problems? And that's not at all to say that resolving your problems or resolving the issues that we have in all of our lives aren't important and aren't things we should do. But what if our greatest need isn't resolving them? Like, what if there's actually a greater, in a good sense, what if there's a greater need that we have? So let's kind of re-examine Ahaz's problem and need, but not this time from our perspective, not this time from his perspective, but this time from God's perspective. What was Ahaz's biggest problem as God saw it? Well, it wasn't, obviously. It wasn't the threats of the foreign invaders, because God created them, and frankly, between taking sips of sweet tea, he could easily eliminate them without even breaking a sweat. So it wasn't the external threat, that wasn't the problem. But then, what was the real problem? Like, what did God see as the real problem as God saw it? Well, the real problem was that Ahaz didn't trust God. Ahaz didn't trust God, and so because of that, his greatest need wasn't an external problem. It wasn't this external problem that needed to be resolved. His greatest problem and his greatest need was learning to trust God. And I think the same is true for us. That our greatest problem is also like learning to trust God, breaking away from our distrust of God. And that means our greatest need as well would be, that the whole process of learning to trust him. So in this passage and in this context, and even in this idea of Jesus as this wonderful counselor, how does Jesus, as the wonderful counselor, help us to trust him? And I see three things in this passage that I want to share with you. The first is that God doesn't immediately remove the obstacle. Sometimes God might, but in this passage, he doesn't immediately remove the obstacle in King Ahaz's path. So I learned a new term recently. I'd heard the term helicopter parenting. Have any of you ever heard that term before? So helicopter parenting is where you are so involved in your child's life, like you're kind of just like hovering over them, kind of engulfing them because you don't want them to have any issues. And so you're just totally there, making sure that they're fine, not bumping into anything, making sure they're safe all along the way. So I knew that term. But Lauren told me about a new term that I hadn't learned before, and it's called lawnmower parenting. It's even better. It's like a helicopter parenting 2.0. Because in lawnmower parenting, what you do is think of like a lawnmower. Instead of even letting them approach problems, you just mow them down. You eliminate all problems so they don't have to experience any problems whatsoever. But imagine if God was a lawnmower God, and if he just never let us experience any problems, never let us have any stressful moments, and he just eliminated every single thing before we ever came to it. What God would be doing was he would be eliminating, in truth, every single opportunity that you would have to learn to trust him. If God just purely eliminated every problem for your life and you had nothing to stress about, no reason to trust him, then you would not be able to learn to trust God. And maybe in heaven that would be okay, but on this earth, the reason why there's that separation in the first part is because our forebears did not trust God. And so that means the highest, the greatest possible good in your life would be learning to trust God. But just purely as a thought experiment, think of how far God would have to go if he really was to eliminate all the obstacles in your life. When I'm on the road, sometimes a little bit of a jerk. Sometimes I have moments of road rage. Lauren usually grabs my arm and tells me to calm down and says, it's not worth it. What if they come into your church one day? You're going to look like a big fool. You're right, babe. Sometimes I'm a jerk to Lauren. Sometimes I'm selfish and insensitive. And so if God was going to eliminate all the roadblocks in Lauren's life, all the stumbling blocks, God would have to eliminate me. And if it's true of me, I'm willing to guess that you, as an employee, as a spouse, as a friend, as a son, as a daughter, as a child, you're probably, at least in one person's life, a little bit of a challenge, even if it's not the norm. Like there's got to be moments where you as well are that challenge, that obstacle in someone else's life. And so if God was going to have to eliminate all roadblocks from Lauren's life, he would have to start with me. I think he would have to eliminate all of us. And yet God doesn't want to eliminate us. What he wants to do is he wants to redeem us. And so that's what I want to focus on now. Like the second thing is that God is faithful even when we are unfaithful. So in this passage, Ahaz, he tells Isaiah that he doesn't want to hear this promise. He doesn't want this promise from God of a sign that God will deliver him. And yet, even when Ahaz is unfaithful and doesn't want this sign, God still gives him this sign. But here's the real beauty of this sign, is that what Ahaz was fighting against was he didn't want God to deliver him from his enemies. He didn't want God to deliver him from his obstacles. But that sign that God gave him through Isaiah, that sign was ultimately, not immediately fulfilled in Isaiah's son, it was ultimately fulfilled in Jesus, that one day there would be this person who would deliver us from our enemies. He would deliver us from sin and from death, and he would deliver us from the biggest obstacle that we have. He would deliver us even from our own distrust of God. How did Jesus do this? Well, Jesus didn't come in demanding everything at his birth. He came in and he was born in a manger. He was born in such a poverty-enriched area that even his own family on his birth couldn't afford a hotel. They had to be born in a small stable. So Jesus did not come as this conquering king. He did not come in as this man who had everything. He came in selfless. And as this selfless, loving Son of God, he was willing to give his life for ours. And so kind of like trust as a part of the Christian life, it's the entire totality of the Christian life. It's by trusting Jesus that we first receive the work that he did when he was willing to trust God, even to the point of willing to die in our place. And because Jesus trusted God, he did the very thing that none of us were able to do, make ourselves right with God. And so within the Christian life, trusting is how we first off, receive that from Jesus, but trusting is how we actually even grow in our faith. Trusting is how we grow deeper in our relationship with Jesus as well. And so that's where I want to come to with our third and final point off this, is that Jesus, he guides us through our problems. So imagine that you've been wanting to go to counseling for a while, and you got the courage and you decided to go. It was something you'd been needing to deal with, and enough was enough. You were going to go. And so you go to your counseling room and you meet your counselor. But when you meet them, you find out that they're only 19 years old. Wouldn't you be a little suspicious, a little bummed out? You're like, wait, how are you even here? And they say, well, actually, I was homeschooled, so I was able to graduate really early from both high school and college. I got my master's at a really young age. And so now I know the material, I know the information, I am ready to help you through your problems. What would you say to that person? You'd say, yeah, maybe you know the book information, but I kind of want someone who's had life experience. I want someone who's gone through life, who's gone through the challenges, who has worked through their own junk so that they can help me work through mine. What we see about Jesus is that Jesus isn't some distant foreign God who doesn't know what we're going through, who doesn't understand the exact situation, the exact feelings that you're experiencing. Hebrews 4:15 tells us that Jesus actually, by coming incarnate, by living among us, he actually knows and experienced exactly the things we've experienced. Hebrews 4:15 says, "For we do not have a high priest who was unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect had been tempted as we are, yet without sin." And so I think the good news here is that no matter what you're experiencing right now, Jesus can help you through it because he has experienced that same type of thing. Are you dealing with betrayal, of the heartbreak of someone stabbing you in the back? Jesus has experienced that. Jesus, one of his closest friends, one of his inner 12, Judas, he sold him out for money. He sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. So Jesus, he understands what it's like to be abandoned. He understands what it's like to be sold out, to be talked about behind his back by his friends, or those he thought were his friends. Are you experiencing heartache, maybe from a breakup, maybe from just the pain of losing a family member or losing someone you love? Jesus has experienced that as well. He both experienced the loss at Lazarus' funeral of seeing someone that he loved, seeing the full weight of death, and he wept over that. But he's also experienced it himself in that, the most intimate relationship of the entire universe is that of Jesus and the Father and the Spirit and the relationship of the triune God. The relationship there has been this one of perfect intimacy where they, for all eternity past, had not had any break in that relationship. There had not been a single moment of selfishness in that entire relationship. And yet Jesus, when he went on the cross, the scripture says that he received God's wrath. He became sin who knew no sin, Paul says in 2 Corinthians. And so what that means is that Jesus was willing to not only be separated from God's love, not only be separated from that relationship, like if you're going on a long-distance trip and you're not able to see a loved one, but he actually received God's wrath and anger for our sin and for our condemnation. And so Jesus knows the things that you've gone through. He's experienced the heartache, the brokenness, even experienced the poverty. As I already said, he was born into an incredibly poor family. And since he's experienced the full range of human emotions, he can walk with us. He can truly be our ultimate wonderful counselor through the highs and the lows of life. But as he guides you through your problems, he's not just there with you like he's walking with you through it. And I think that alone would be an incredible benefit. Just knowing that he is there with us is so comforting through our lowest of days and through our moments of trials. But even more, like while he's walking with us, he is actively transforming us. So let me tell you really quickly 2 ways that he's transforming us. The first is that he is giving us peace. You think about like that situation in your life where you're stressed out and it's this annoying obstacle in your life. Today, as I was driving here to church, as I was doing some errands, I had my car run out of battery. I haven't even told Lauren this yet. It happened yesterday as well. It's been definitely a frustrating, annoying thing right now. I jumped Lauren's car, and now I think my battery kind of got damaged in that process. And so now my car battery probably needs to be replaced. But as I was coming to church, even tonight, I was frustrated that my battery died, and I had to ask random people in the parking garage, get rejected about 20 times, to finally someone in Chicago was willing to give me a jump. But as I was experiencing that, I thought of this passage. And I thought, I could just be really annoyed right now, and I could whine, and I could throw up my hands, and I could swear. Or I could say, God, even more important than the resolution is that I'm learning to trust you in this experience. And not to say that means that there's going to be a better resolution because of that, but to say that learning to trust Jesus is even more important than the resolution. And so that's kind of the challenge that I want to give us. What if we have a paradigm shift today? What if rather than valuing the resolution the most, and we should value resolution. Resolution is good. It can be a beautiful thing. But what if we valued even more than the resolution? What if we valued growing in our trust of God? What if that was our highest value? What if it was even a higher value that we had to grow in that trust than to have the situation resolved? Now, hear me clearly. I'm not at all saying that we shouldn't seek resolution. When I saw my grandfather on his deathbed, he hadn't seen his brother in 10 years, and seeing the two of them come together and restore their relationship for the first time in 10 years, it was a beautiful experience that brought me to tears. And yet, I think my grandfather even grew more during that time of learning to trust God with that relationship, with his life. Learning to trust him was even that much more valuable to him, because that's the second benefit. As we learn to trust God, we're not trusting just for the sake of trust. Think about any relationship, a friendship, your parents, a marriage, whatever it is. Like whenever you are learning to trust someone in a relationship, that's kind of the fountain bed of intimacy. That's kind of the precursor to growing in deeper into that relationship. And so when we trust, we don't only get this peace because we know God has us, but we're also getting to grow in the most important relationship of all. Heaven is not about seeing our long-lost family members. Heaven, like the ultimate prize, is that we get to be with God. Not that those things aren't good, but the ultimate prize of heaven is God. And so growing in our relationship, him, again, is the best thing that we could have. So what might it look like for your life to have a higher value for trusting in God more than resolving your problems. So we're moving to the point of our service here where we take a moment to reflect. And so rather than ending in a prayer immediately today, I just want to give you a space to kind of reflect on that question briefly. So feel free to close your eyes if you'd rather keep them open, door for that as well. But just do whatever you need to do to get into a posture of contemplation. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. The first one is, identify one problem, one stressor in your life that is also an opportunity where you can learn to trust God. Maybe it's like a relational conflict you're having. Maybe it's the difficult coworker. Maybe it's about something that's happened in your past or something that's going on right now. But what is one problem or one stressor in your life that there's also an opportunity where you can learn to trust God? Do you have that? Second question is, what would it look like in that situation to value growth and trust more than a resolution to that situation? So again, that's not saying that you're not seeking to resolve the situation, but saying, what does it look like for you to have a higher value in the growth of trust? Your growth, that value is so high that it's even greater, more greatly desired than the resolution to the situation itself. What would that look like? And lastly, and after this one, I'll give you a few moments to pray to God. How might Jesus transform you through this process? Father, I thank you for each person who's here tonight, Lord, for the unique work that you've been doing in their life. Thank you for the unique ways that you are drawing them to yourself and drawing others around them to yourself as well, Lord. And so I just pray that each of us here tonight, Lord, that we would have a paradigm shift, that we would truly value growing in trust even more than the resolution, Lord. And that might seem like a ridiculous idea, Lord, in the eyes of the world, but in your eyes, there could be nothing greater for us, Lord. So I pray that you give us the eyes, Lord, to see opportunities in our life, to see them with a new lens. Help us to see them the way you want us to see them, that you are in control and that you are with us and you want us to trust you through those moments, Lord. Give us the power, give us the strength, Lord, and give us the peace as we learn what it means to trust you and all the fruit that comes with it. In your name we pray. Amen.